Well, a development this morning in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled that in some areas of European policy, the Scottish Government, of course headed by the SNP, has overstepped the mark. Well, joining us now from Edinburgh is Michael Russell, MSP. He's Scotland's Government Business and Constitutional Relations Secretary. So a bit of a slapdown from the UK Supreme Court then, Mr. Russell.
Have you actually watched the judgment or read it? Because the reality is entirely different from what you've just presented. I mean, I'd be quite happy for you to run the judgment live, because what it tells you is, in actual fact, they said the UK government challenged the bill we passed in March. The UK Supreme Court said it was competent, which is what the UK government didn't want them to say. It actually said they changed the rules after our bill, which was, of course, in the Scottish word, sleek it. But they also said that substantial parts of the bill still stood. This was entirely contrary to what the UK government wanted and said. So I'm afraid, Adam, you've turned this on its head. Could you turn it back the right way, and then we can talk sensibly about it?
Well, I'm very happy. I mean, you know more about it than I do, to be honest, because I'm in Brussels at the moment. But is it not the case that the Supreme Court also said, in some contexts, that the Scottish Parliament overstepped the mark? The Scottish Government overstepped the mark?
No, actually it isn't right. So let me give you what actually happened. Here's a bit of news for you as well as your audience. First, the Supreme Court said that the bill was within competence, as we passed it, with one paragraph exception. So the bill was in competence, and it said all the arguments of the UK government about this were wrong, and indeed also said the presiding officer here was wrong to say it wasn't. Secondly, it said that what happened thereafter was the UK government put into their withdrawal bill a clause, a sleek it clause, as we say, retrospectively to try and stop.
Sleek it is Scottish for sneaky, basically, isn't it?
Sleek it, yeah, well, exactly. If you think sleek it, think Michael Gove. And then what happened was, even with that, there are substantial parts of our bill that survived. So in actual fact, this is a resounding victory for the Lord Advocate, who have presented our case, for the case that we have put, and also a resounding victory for the people of Scotland and for a number of parties here, because it wasn't just the government that put this bill forward. We were supported by Labour, by the Liberal Democrats, by the Greens. So this was a victory for the Scottish Parliament. So this is a good day to be here. And I'm sorry the news hasn't yet reached Brussels, but I'll work harder to make sure it gets there.
OK. All right. Yeah, just explain this practically. What difference does this ruling make, therefore, in terms of Brexit and the input of the Scottish Government?
Well, it shows that the Scottish Parliament has a substantial role. The Scottish Parliament can legislate for it. But it also shows that the UK government's behaviour, as it has been in the last few days, is utterly shambolic and incompetent and against democratic interests. So it confirms what we have known for some time, and you've been discussing this morning, that we have a government which is on its last legs, and in Scotland we have a government that's standing up for the people of Scotland in this matter. I think that is an important issue.
Now, what about the government on its last legs? The SNP at Westminster, part of the group of smaller parties who want to have a no-confidence motion, but it appears you simply can't force one. Is that right?
Well, you can always table one, but a no-confidence motion wouldn't succeed without the support of the principal opposition party, and that's the job that's got to be done. Over a period of time, everybody has to get together to defeat this government, to get rid of this government. If there can't be an election, and I agree an election would be a good idea, but if there can't be an election, then there should be a second vote, a people's vote. And that's the process of keeping the parties together and working together. That's what we're trying to do in the Scottish Parliament as well. Last week, we actually voted on the Prime Minister's deal. We did it. Westminster wasn't allowed to do it, and we rejected it cross-party with the exception of the Conservatives. So I'm keen to keep encouraging the parties to work together, to find a way towards a motion of no confidence, but to get on with things too, because the clock is ticking, and if the Prime Minister is really trying to run this down into a position where people feel they have no options, then that's the wrong thing to do, and moreover, it shouldn't be allowed to happen. So there is a role for all the opposition parties to recognise that the time will come when action has to be taken.
But just one final question. in the end, if that's what she decides to do and there isn't any agreement in the Westminster Parliament, it's going to be no-deal Brexit, isn't it?
No, I sincerely hope not. I mean, I've been working on no-deal preparations here for some months, and they are horrific. I mean, the implications of no-deal are absolutely awful. But no, it shouldn't be. And indeed, the Taoiseach in the Dáil earlier this week made it absolutely clear that no-deal doesn't have to be an option. And that's what we need to make sure. No-deal isn't an option. It would be ridiculous for anybody to say it is. What we need to do is to get some sense into this. And the sense comes either from a general election or, I think, more likely now, a people's vote.
Mike Russell, thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you.
joining us there from the Holyrood Parliament in Edinburgh.